Hoop Heads podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
A communication circle at the end of every practice, and we literally, I mean, I was at Marquette the other day and heard a great quote. You know, a great practice is defined by how you end it. And I think there's going to be a lot of emotions in a practice, but I remember early on practice would end and it just, sometimes we'd end on a bad note and it would trickle into the next day. So no matter where we're at, we've had a good competitive practice or we've ended on kind of a poor note, we end with a communication circle. And what that means is, basketball is now done. Let's circle up. Let's look each other in the eye, and I'll have a thought form every day. And sometimes the thought is very intense, like tell us something we don't know about you, or tell us tell us something about your family, or tell us what you want to do when you get out of college. And then some of them are like, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite book? What's your and then when there's a great game on, who's winning tonight? Duke, Carolina. And we just kind of do little things like that. So that's one big thing, and we have to look each other in the eye and we have to hold hands while we communicate. So that's every day at the end of practice.
Coach Nick LoGalbo is entering his 11th season as the head boys basketball coach at his alma mater, Lane Tech High School in Chicago, Illinois. His background in basketball started when he played for Lane Tech as a 4-year player. Nick then played 4 years of collegiate NCAA basketball at Benedictine University. He has been working at Lane Tech since graduating from college as an English teacher, basketball coach, and now also serves as the school's athletic director. Nick works several camps during the offseason, including the Duke University basketball camp and Snow Valley Basketball School. Coach LoGalbo works with USA Basketball as a lead clinician for their youth development clinics and regional camps, serves as a regional coordinator for USAB 3-on-3, and has also spoken at USA Basketball's Coaches Academy to other aspiring coaches from across the country. Nick was awarded the Rising Star Award by Benedictine University for his work in education and philanthropy, working to combat gun violence in Chicago. Coach LoGalbo has organized and facilitated several Chicago stand-up rallies to raise awareness and empower youth to take a stand against gun violence. Coach LoGalbo is passionate about the game and has identified that his purpose is to use that passion to serve others. Grab a pen and paper so you're prepared as you enjoy this episode with Coach Nick LoGalbo from Lane Tech High School in Chicago, Illinois.
Hello and welcome to the Hoop Heads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel. And today we're here with Coach Nick LoGalbo from Lane Tech in Chicago. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you guys for having me. What an honor. Excited to do this tonight, guys.
Yeah, we're very excited to have you on and get a chance to talk to you, hear a little bit about your story. We want to start out by talking to you about how you got into the game of basketball as a young kid and what first attracted you to the game.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story. I growing up in inner city Chicago in the 90s, I mean, you couldn't really escape basketball. Obviously with the Jordan era and just everything happening with hoops. But it's funny, my dad grew up in my neighborhood playing brat hockey and ice hockey any way he could. And my mom was actually kind of a gymnast for a while. And so growing up, my dad was kind of forced me to play hockey. And my mom was like, well, if he's playing hockey, he's got to do gymnastics. So I started doing everything. But then it was really my older cousin. He just kind of used to beat me up in my yard, and we'd play pickup pretty much every day. We had a hoop in my backyard, and that kind of work, that competitive nature just kind of started from there. I played in grade school, and then when I got to high school, it's all I wanted to do, and played for the school that I now coach at, Lane Tech, and got to play a little bit in college. And yeah, I mean, that was it, man. My cousin beating me up every day kind of fueled the fire, and here we are.
So how did you end up at Lane Tech? What was the decision in terms of going to school at Lane Tech? Was it, because I'm assuming that's not a neighborhood school, that's you guys are a private school?
Well, so it's funny. So we're not private, but we're also not a neighborhood school. In the city of Chicago, under the Chicago Public Schools kind of umbrella, there's a series of, I think, 7 or 8 selective enrollment schools. So it's high level academics, so you have to test to get in. Our school, Lane, we usually have, I think there's about 10,000 Chicagoans that take the select enrollment exam, and our school has an enrollment this year of 4,603. So we have 4,603 kids, and we accept a class each year of around 1,000. But obviously, like I said, it's highly academic and highly competitive. So growing up in Chicago, my dad went to a Catholic high school, Catholic grade school. I went to a Catholic grade school, and then we were just struggling a little bit financially. Catholic high schools were kind of a stretch, and luckily I got into Lane, and the rest is history.
So you're saying you were an academic powerhouse, huh?
Well, we're actually, I'm not. When I was there, we weren't as good as we are now academically. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I would be able to get in now with the grades I had, but we're actually the number 3 high school academically in the state, and we're, I think, 110 in the nation or something like that. So it's pretty crazy. Our kids are they're bright kids. So
that's great. 4,600 kids in one school.
Yeah.
So is it like a flash mob every time the bell rings? Seriously, like I can't even. I went to school in Strongsville when a school in the greater Cleveland area, and when I graduated, we called it like the crazy house because there was like 2,400 kids in the building. I can't even imagine what 46 that has to be crazy.
Yeah, it's you know what, I'm going to tell you something. I'm extremely biased, and I bleed our school colors are green and gold. I always say I bleed green and gold. I really love our school, but it's pretty intense. The bell rings and you're just flooded. And I tell my wife, I think it kind of helped me as a basketball player, like just getting through the hallways and reading seams and shooting gaps, you know what I mean? Just trying to get around everybody.
It's all about positioning.
Exactly right. Reading angles, man, So yeah. I think Lane set me up in a lot of different ways.
No doubt. So talk about, after you get done playing at Lane, talk a little bit about your recruitment to Benedictine University and how that came to be, how you made that choice, and kind of what your 4 years were like there.
Yeah. So, in high school, I mean, again, I'm not going to try to play this off like I'm a Division I All-American. I mean, I'm 5'10" and wasn't super athletic, but I kind of pride myself. I think I work hard, and I pride myself on that. And I think the people who know me would say the same thing. And I just tried to outwork my opponents every game. And I had some people kind of in my corner, and I was actually looking to go to a bigger school and try to, do the manager thing. I was looking at DePaul or UIC, which is obviously right here in the city. And one of my former coaches was like, hey, I could reach out and maybe you could try to be a manager and stay around the game. Because I knew I wanted to coach from an early age, and I was going into education to become an English teacher and a coach. That was kind of my plan. But then, my senior year, I mean, I was shooting the ball all right. I mean, we weren't very good. So, it is what it is. And I got to meet Coach Bunkenberg at Benedictine, and he was a Chicago guy too. And he was very welcoming. It was a good school for academics, and there was a lot of alumnus who would go through Benedictine and were coaching. And getting to know some of those through my time at Benedictine, some of those coaches have been, very impactful in my career. And so it was kind of a no-brainer. I decided I want to stay kind of close to home. I'm Italian and close to the family and pasta together every Sunday, so I wasn't going too far. And I went to Benedictine, played for Coach Bunkenberg, but I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't really play a whole lot in college. My freshman and sophomore year was just, learning curve. Like I said, we weren't really great in high school, and there was a lot of things I didn't know about the game, so I was just kind of a student. And then my junior and senior year, we actually had a kid transfer in who was NCAA, like all conference, all region, played overseas for a little bit. So I was playing behind him for 2 years and just doing my best to go at him every day and just be a student of the game. And I think it helped me, obviously, coaching a lot. And that was pretty much my experience there, and made some lifelong friends along the way. So
yeah, it's great. When you went in, what was the biggest adjustment for you going from being a high school player to being a college player? I know there's a lot of, coaches out there, questions that, high school parents or players may have about, making that adjustment from being a high school player to a college player. Again, at any level. We've talked about it on several other podcasts about just, how good you have to be in order to be able to play college basketball, at any level. And a lot of times, Division III schools or NAIA schools kind of get looked down upon sometimes in the recruiting process by players. But we all know that no matter what level of college basketball you're playing, that you're playing it at a very high level. So can you talk a little bit about, if you can remember, what your biggest adjustment was from a playing standpoint when you went from high school to college?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, the physicality of the game is just so different. I was probably 160 pounds soaking wet out of high school, and luckily, man, my roommate in college was 6'7", and just he looks like Will Ferrell, 6'7", red curly hair, and
Was his
you know,
name
he and I,
Frank? Was his name
yeah,
Frank?
Frank the Tank. And you
That's
know,
it.
Old School came out when we were in college too, so that was obviously a big joke
Yeah,
for
I
us.
believe. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, Frank the Tank and I, we were in the weight room together every day, man. We just fell in love with it. And I put on probably 20 pounds of muscle in my think my leap from my freshman to sophomore year, just because I mean I couldn't compete with the physicality at the collegiate level. And you're 1,000% spot on with the fact that I've been coaching for 14 years, and there's a lot of guys when you hear, oh, I could play Division III, and they don't really understand. Like not everyone gets to play Division III, Division II, Division I basketball, but I mean the Division III game is the purest form of basketball, I think, at that level, because you have guys who truly love to play. They're not getting pampered, they're not getting financial money. They're playing for the love of the game, and they get to compete at a high level. And when I was at Benedictine, I mean, we played Loyola University Division I, we played Eastern Illinois University Division I, we played Northern Illinois University. I mean, you're traveling, you're playing some high level competition. Our league was very good. We had 3 or 4 teams in the top 25. So it's like it blows my mind to hear some of these kids when they're getting recruited and they don't really see the value in what you can get. I mean, you're playing college basketball and you get another 4 years to play the game that you love. I don't really know how you can turn that down. And that's what I tell my guys. I have 3 players right now that are potential Division III players. One guy might have a look a little higher, but I'm in there all the time about just what an amazing experience it is. So
Yeah, talk a little bit about that in terms of what you do or what your role might be as a coach when you have players that are being recruited. What's the role of a high school coach? What are some of the things that you do to help facilitate the process for some of your kids that have an opportunity to play at the next level?
yeah, reminding them, number one, how lucky they are to get to do what they love every day and have a chance to continue their careers that a lot of people don't. I think one of our mantras is, in our program, I stole it, right from Coach K. I worked at Duke camp for like 14, 12 years, whatever it is. And Coach K always says, don't take special for granted. And I remind our guys of that all the time. Getting to play at a school like ours, we'll get to that later, I guess. But getting back to the recruiting piece, you get to play the game that you love. And if you have any coaches who express any interest in you, obviously you have to show an unbelievable amount of gratitude and appreciate the process. And then obviously from there, just helping them along. Like I said, we're really lucky that we have a great counseling department and we're at a high level academic school. So they're taking care of the books. My 3 seniors that are probably going to play college basketball combined have an average ACT of, I think, 32 or 33. And they're like a 4.8, 4.9 GPA on a 4.0 scale. So there's not any issues with grades with them, which we're very lucky. But staying on them about getting their applications done on time, getting their letters of rec done, and obviously I'll write one for them as their coach. And obviously this is a really big one, I think, in my years as a coach, being transparent with the college coaches that are taking the time to recruit you. I actually had a talk this week with my starting point guard, and there was a school reaching out, and it just really isn't a good fit for him, and he knows that. And he asked me what to do. He said, Coach, I don't really think this is a school for me, but I don't want to be rude or disrespectful. And I thought that was really, like for an 18-year-old kid to think that way, it made me pretty proud. And I told him, the best thing you could do is be transparent, because you don't want to waste their time, and they could be recruiting other athletes. And he had that conversation, and now he's, narrowing his list down. So, transparency is key in everything. For us as coaches, being transparent with our players, and for players being transparent with coaches. So those are some of the big pieces of advice I think I kind of tell our guys in the recruitment process.
Do you spend any time cultivating relationships with the college coaches in the Chicago area, in terms of being able to build those relationships so that when it comes time for your players to be recruited, is that something that happens there for you, or no?
Yeah. So we actually, in Illinois, we have a lot of Division IIIs, and there's quite a few Division Is. There's really only, I think, 2 Division IIs in our state. but the Division III network, obviously getting to play for Benedictine and being in that pipeline, but over the years, like I said, being 14 years at a school, we haven't had a Division I kid in our program since I've been there, but we've had about probably 10 Division III players, and I think a lot of the Division III schools know now that you're going to get a high academic kid from Lane, and you're going to get a kid who's hopefully, I'd like to think that they're being taught the right way and they're going to play the game the right way. So we've, the coaches in our area that do reach out, I'm very, open to them coming to our open gyms and our workouts. This year, we've already had 4 D3 guys come to our open gyms, and just staying in contact with those guys. And then obviously, like I'm a Benedictine alum, so they do a camp or a showcase, so I try to get out there and help them out with things like that. And then just staying in the pipeline. I mean, obviously, like I said, we haven't had any Division I talent in our gym yet, but I'm out to a lot of the practices with the staffs in Chicago. I was at Loyola already this year with Coach Mosier. I actually went out to Marquette about last week, I think, and I usually go out to Northwestern and see those guys and just try to keep a relationship and let them know if there's anything I can do, not just with our guys, but with guys in our league. Our league is I don't know, top to bottom. I mean, I'm sure you guys have probably heard, the Whitney Youngs of the world, but I mean, our conference, top to bottom, it's pretty ridiculous. It's really like a super conference in the Chicago Public League now, and I think there's 4 classes in Illinois, and I think in the past 5 or 6 years, I think there's 5 or 6 state champions in our conference. So it's a pretty competitive league. So I like college coaches know all the time, if there's anyone else you're looking at, let me know. And then obviously the pipeline with Snow Valley, it's not just the Chicago coaches, but the Midwest network of Division III coaches. I try to stay in touch with those guys a lot too.
So I have to ask the question. You just said you talked to Loyola. Have you met the famous lady from Loyola? I don't know. Did you get a chance to meet her when you were there?
Jane, I have not had a chance to meet her, unfortunately. And man, what a crazy year for them, and I mean a phenomenon. I mean, I know all over the country, but in Chicago, I mean, you couldn't even get up there on their campus, during the Final Four run. And I mean, I have a few former students that are currently there now, and they just said, I mean, the campus was just shut down, and she became, I mean, she's a legend, she's got bobbleheads in the city and Sister Jean shirts. I mean, it's crazy, it's crazy what Coach Mosier did with that team last year. And I'll tell you what, they're for real. I mean, being at their practice a couple weeks ago, wow. I mean, it's really special what they got cooking over there. But not to digress, but hopefully more of the same this year.
Yeah, I think it's really cool when you have, and it's coming more, it's becoming more prevalent with sort of the balance in college basketball that you're seeing these mid-major programs, come in and get started, and then boom, all of a sudden they're in the Final 8 or in the Final 4. And I think it just is something that makes college basketball just fantastic to watch, and it's what makes March Madness what it is, because you have all these different power schools that obviously have bigger resources and better recruiting budgets and all that stuff, and yet still, because I think the depth of talent across the country is so much better than it was maybe 25, 30 years ago. You have these mid-major schools that are able to jump in and make it to the Final Four and go on a run like like they were able to do last year. So that's got to be super exciting for everybody there, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, and it's fun, like being at a program like ours where we're playing in our league. There's just I mean, we're talking the Whitney Youngs and we see like the Simeons and the Morgan Parks and these schools with so much unbelievable talent, and for our school, we've been trying to figure out like what do we do to compete and who are we, so we've really taken a lot of the pages out of the books of the programs that I've studied, a lot of the mid majors, when Brad Stevens at Butler and everything that Butler's doing now, and the Loyolas of the world, and try to model ourselves off of like mid major programs that have guys sticking around that buy into a culture and buy into a belief and a style of play, and that's what we try to do. So that's why I'm studying those guys in those practices as much as I can.
Right. So for 2 things that I pull out of that. One question, the first question I have relates to what you just said there, which is when you go to a college practice, what are some of the things that you're looking for? Are you looking to pick up a drill? Are you looking to pick up some culture things? Are you just kind of generally they're trying to see what exactly it is that they're doing that leads to their success. What are you looking for when you're at a college practice?
I pride myself on being a lifelong learner, and I'm kind of a little OCD about studying the game. I don't know. I even a lot of the guys that have been on this podcast, guys we've talked to, students of the game, and for me, anytime I'm in an environment where I feel like there's some people to learn from, which is obviously every time you walk into a gym, I have it's kind of weird. I have notepads, so I have where I'm going to take notes, like my words. I'm an English teacher and a basketball coach, so I have a lot of things that I write down for the cultures and the quotes and the takeaways.
Right.
And I just have obviously my little diagramming sheet for just little drills and sets that we'll see. But I'm not really going in with a narrow focus. I'm really just trying to be a sponge, and literally I don't really look up. I mean, I'm taking a look and I'm writing things down I got about 10 pages of notes. I just can't put my pen down. I'm trying to get as much as I can, but then from there, I think that a really good thing to think about for a lot of the coaches just getting into it, and I'm sure we've all heard this a million times, but it's not about you're gonna take as much as you can, but it's about what you can actually use and utilize with your program. So once I get my notes, I try to kind of look through and then just have a sheet that I just call my takeaways sheet for this season, and I'll just kind of bullet point all the things that we're going to try to implement this year, whether it be a little quotable thing we could use as for a thought of the day or in a communication circle, whether that be a new drill or a new way to teach a drill we've already done or make it competitive in a different way. So I actually got about 3 or 4 sheets of takeaways that I'll keep in my kind of binder that I bring with me every day to practice, just for different ideas and different ways to keep things fresh, throughout the season. And then, I keep them all on file, and I've got just a file on my computer just of all these notes and clinics. And then over the summer months, I'll go in and I'll just kind of hey, I remember I was at this practice or at this clinic, and I'll just kind of open them up and kind of take a look at some things and see if there's anything I could take away for the next season, and just try to keep things fresh. And, that's the thing with this generation of kids too. I think it's different, especially in the last 5 to 10 years. I feel like there's just so much out there and there's so many things to grab their attention. So if we're not doing our part as coaches, I think we're failing our kids. So, Coach Showalter always says, players don't have bad practices, coaches do. So I never want to be that guy. I always want to be my best for our guys, not just our players, but my assistants and the rest of the staff, because obviously, I think everything kind of, comes down from the head, and the energy in the gym's got to come from the players, but we have to match that as coaches and be prepared. So
describe that process of how you prepare for a practice. So what does your practice prep look like when you're trying to get ready and design a practice to make sure that you don't have that bad practice like Coach Showalter was describing?
Yeah. So, there's a few things. I'm also the AD at our school. So it's been the past 2 years since I've made this transition. So I'm teaching a class called Sports Communications, and then I'm the AD and I'm the head basketball coach. So I don't have the prep time like I did when I first started coaching. I used to really just designate my mornings before the start of the school day, and then usually one prep period when I probably should have been grading English papers, but pretty much that period was designed to just kind of take a look. I'd reach out to my staff or any thoughts for the day, because not all my coaches are in the building. So, that's another part of it, trying to, communicate via email or text, just hey, what are some takeaways from yesterday? What can we add to the practice today? But and then, it gets into just kind of taking a look at the practice plan from the day before and looking at what we need to get in for today. Obviously, who we're playing, our upcoming opponents affect what that practice looks like. I think some of the things we try to do defensively is we pretty much do breakdown defensive stuff every day, from one man just stance and one-on-one competitive drills to build up to 2-on-2, 3-on-3 shell breakdown. A drill we've taken, it's one of our DNA drills from Snow Valley, which we call cutthroat, which is kind of 4-on-4. where we're competing, and there's non-negotiables that are kind of principles that we play out of, and it's just a competitive way to play the game, and we'll do it from the offensive and defensive side. And then we get into our 5-man shell breakdown, and that's really where the design comes in, because we're looking at scout reports for this week. We're looking at who we're playing. We're looking at how they defend pick and rolls, how we're going to have to defend their offense, and what are some of their quick hitters and sets they run. And that's what we do, for those practices leading up to that game day. When we are a team that we believe we have to make between 10 and 12 made 3-point field goals in any given game for us to be really competitive in our league. So we get a lot of shots up. Competitive shooting drills, but then snapshot shooting is what we call it. Shots in our offensive sets, in our actions, and try to tweak that every day to make it fun. Whether it's rejecting a side pick and roll and getting some drift threes, whether that's accepting the pick and roll and hitting our wraps, or whatever it is. Keeping it fresh, but working on things that we know we need for that game that week. And then obviously keeping things competitive. We don't just scrimmage. We do 4-minute quarters and kind of look at takeaways. We do a drill called 3 trips drill, where we're kind of looking at something specific, a certain set we're trying to run, and how, or maybe, scout team, how we're going to defend a set the other team's going to run in that 3-trip drill. So those are a lot of things that we look at, and obviously now that we start November 5th, the first 2 weeks of practice, there's a lot of obviously toughness and character drills, we kind of call them, to kind of get guys ready and see what we're made of. So that's some of the things we look at in practice planning.
So something I pulled out of there, you were talking about the amount of threes that you feel like you have to make to be competitive in your league. How do you see like the current pace of play in the NBA affecting that to? Will it affect your guys' league at all? I mean, based on what you're saying, it seems like there's lots of threes going up. Do you expect other teams to increase the amount of threes even to a greater extent, and maybe you're going to have to increase that to 12 to 15 just because you're seeing how quick all these other teams are playing in the NBA and college basketball? Do you expect it to change at all, or no?
That's a really good question. Obviously, if you follow basketball, that the game is just trending that way. I mean, across the board. But I'd like to think that we're not going to have to change our number. We really pride ourselves on the defensive end, and we really try to, everything we try to do offensively is what we're trying to take away defensively. And I think that's obviously a pretty basic statement, but we're really trying to run guys off the 3-point line. But really in our league, the league that we're in is so athletic and so in your face at the rim. We got guys who really want to dribble, drive, and go. And I feel like we're one of the better shooting teams in our league. So that's kind of where that philosophy kind of comes from. For us to be competitive, we got to kind of make the opposing team take contested 2-point field goals outside of the paint. And we have to, conversely, our non-negotiables are obviously getting open rhythm threes, getting to the free throw line, or getting made layups. We try to focus on those 3 priorities in transition offense and in our half-court offense. So, I mean, obviously, it's a lot easier it's a lot easier said than done. But those are things that we talk about a lot. And the thing is, we've been pretty successful at getting teams to take those contested 2s. Obviously, with the analytics game the way it is, I mean, it just speaks volumes about, if you make 5 threes, you need the opposing team to make X amount of 2s. So you need to make 8 2s to be comparable. So we're trying to just really use some of that analytics to our advantage. But I'm also kind of the other side of the coin where toughness wins, and sometimes those numbers can go out the window a little bit. So I'm kind of all over the place with analytics and my philosophy on it. But those are numbers we try to kind of trend towards, and numbers that we give. And honestly, to be honest, I think our guys, every pregame we talk about 3 keys every game. We don't want to flood our players, and we don't want to get them inundated with things. And them knowing that we have a kind of a target number in terms of 3-point field goals made, and as well, a target number in terms of turnovers on our end and turnovers we're forcing. Those are things that are pretty much just kind of like who we are and what we're trying to do every night. So it just kind of becomes part of our culture and what we do.
So speaking of the analytics and statistics, how much do you have access to that data? And if you do have access to that data, how do you go about getting that access? And then how do you use it as a coach to make your team better? Because like you said, I think there's still a lot of us, and I would include myself in this, and I'm sure most coaches probably have a combination of the eye test and kind of your gut versus what what analytics might tell us. So how do you use that, the new wave of statistical information that's out there, and where do you gather that information if you do have access to it?
Yeah, so we use the crossover technology. So, Huddle and Crossover, to the big video breakdown, tools out there now. And we've been with Crossover now for quite a few years, and we will film our game and we upload it that night, and we typically have the game broken down for us the next day. So we do utilize those stats. Obviously, my assistant coach is really big on it. He actually played for me, and he was a communications guy at Bradley, and now he's running all of our social media, and he's really big on getting some of those numbers up for our guys in the locker room. So we're kind of charting our 3-point field goal percentages. We were charting charges. We were charting turnovers, and different things like that. And we kind of had a little leaderboard in the locker room, just with some of our key stats, things that we're really emphasizing. Because again, there's a million stats, but you can't really get guys to own everything. You have to, I think, emphasize a key few things and make them a part of your DNA and get guys to buy into it. So that's one of the things we do. We did this for a while, went away from it. Now we're getting back to it this year, but we do kind of like a practice player of the week. So we try to chart some of these things on a more minuscule level in practice, specifically with charges and 3-point field goals made. Just little things like that. So we'll celebrate that. We'll have a practice player of the week. And it's not just analytics for that kind of stuff. A lot of it has to do with toughness and the sacrifices you make on the floor for our program. But things like that, I think, get the guys bought into what we're trying to do as a program. And again, I think small battles are so important. Getting your players to, you're not going to win every game. I love to say we're the best program in the world, we're going to win every game, but that's just not the case. I think, Brad Stevens had a great quote the other night about, we're a culture that's so fixated on trophies. And I just feel like, he made the point when everything's about growth and the process of getting better, and, like life is just so much more fun,
Yep.
When everything's just about what you're going to take away from it and the result, you're going to win and lose a lot of battles, So we try to make everything about the process, about growth, about getting better. And, how do you measure process and how do you measure growth? Well, I think you got to inherently instill these small little things and every day have some goals and have some things that we're shooting for and striving for. And, some days we're going to get there and some days we're not. But, when you're seeing growth in your practices every day and you're seeing guys and guys are feeling like they're getting better. I just think about when I was in college, back to that real quick, when I was making gains in the weight room because I just committed to trying to get my body right. And I was going at my 6'7", crazy roommate who's throwing weight around like a knucklehead, and I'm trying to keep up with him. Man, I just felt like a different person. I felt really good about myself making those small 5-point increases. When you're seeing growth and it's tangible, obviously that just aligns with everything in your confidence, which is one of the most important things in any avenue of life is your self-belief. Obviously, I think you're going to see more success, and that's what we've really prided ourselves on, in winning these small battles every day and making measurable growth real for our players. And I think that's one of the things that has had our program kind of on the rise steadily the past couple of years. So,
yeah, I think by celebrating those small wins like you described, because again, our greater culture does look so much at the outcome as
right.
opposed to the process. And I think that's something that all coaches are probably fighting internally within their program, is how do we get people to focus on the day-to-day small wins as opposed to, we want to go, 12-0 in the league, or we want to win, this championship, or we want to go undefeated, or whatever the case might be. I think it's important to remember that process-oriented success most often. Again, you're going to experience success a lot more often if you're focusing on those small pieces of the process rather than focusing on the giant outcome. I want to jump back for a second, Nick, and go back to when you graduated from college and talk about how you got back to Lane Tech in the first place. So you get done at Benedictine, you're done playing, you've got your degree, you want to be an English teacher. How does it happen that you end up back at your alma mater? How did that work out for you?
Well, it wasn't part of the plan. It was, I don't know. I'm a faithful person. I'm a faithful man. And I'm also a very big believer in the law of attraction. And, James Allen, as a man thinketh, men do not attract what they want. They attract what they are. That's one of my kind of things I say to myself every day. And I don't know how it happened, to be honest with you, Mike. I think the universe kind of jumped in the way, and I was literally I don't know, I guess I could say it now, but I was really set up to do my student teaching at a suburban high school close to where I went to school, Benedictine, which is kind of on the outskirts of the city. And maybe a day or two before I was really supposed to go to this school and kind of get set up and get prepared to do my student teaching, I got a call from one of my former high school coaches who had become the head coach, and he wanted me to come on board and be his head freshman coach and to, be back at Lane. And I was like, wow, I really want to get into coaching right away. I'm honored, but my school, Benedictine, kind of had an issue with me student teaching at my alma mater. And it just kind of worked out where, Lane was supportive of me coming back, and Benedictine worked with me on it. And I hope I'm not getting anyone in trouble. It just kind of, I don't know if their policy is still the same at Benedictine, but it just kind of worked out where I got my student teaching placement switched, and I ended up back at Lane. In my first year, I was the head freshman coach and a varsity assistant. So I was doing a 6 a.m. practice and then a varsity practice after school every day all season while student teaching and trying to figure out how to be a teacher, and which was obviously is a battle in of itself. And then student teaching finished at the end of that first semester, and I was kind of subbing in the building as much as I could while our season was winding down. And luckily, I'm at a school, our English department has 40 plus teachers, but at the point where I was at, there was a lot of teachers that were there for a really long time. And very fortunately, a position opened up that spring, and I applied for it. And this is kind of a sidebar, but for anyone who's listening who's a young coach getting into teaching or coaching, I had my first interview was with our assistant principal and our department chair, and our department chair wasn't really pro sports and kind of saw me as just a coach. And then at the end of the interview, I thought I did really well. And she asked me, is there anything else you want to say? And I was like, I'm here to be a teacher. And I think a teacher is a coach. And I think I kind of won her over that. And then our principal at the time was a very, very just a dominant presence. He was a Division I football player at U of I with Dick Buckus. And he was just this man of integrity. And he was a Lane alum also. And I remember I was in my last interview, and there's about 10 other people applying for the job, and I was like, okay, I got everything nailed down what I'm going to say in this interview, and in terms of teaching and coaching and pedagogy and all that. And he just looked me in the eye and he asked me, he's like, Nick, what is integrity? And talk about like a curveball, and talk about kind of being put on the spot. But I think I answered it well enough. Obviously, I got the job, and kind of the rest went from there. So, you never know what you're going to get asked in an interview. So that was one of the big takeaways from that.
Yeah, no matter how prepared you are,
right.
There can always be something that gets thrown in there that you don't expect. How weird was it for you then to walk back in to Lane 4 years after you had walked out as a student, and now you walk back in as a staff member? I'm obviously assuming that many of the teachers that you had when you were a student were still there teaching. So how weird was it to go from one side of that situation to the other?
And it was incredibly, incredibly awkward. I still call, like, I'm the athletic director now, and our head soccer coach was my teacher, was my Spanish teacher when I was a student. And I still call him Senor Ricks. I don't call him Andrew. I still, and
Yeah.
I'm the athletic director, and I've been there for 14 years, so it's still kind of one of those things where, I have some of those teachers that were still there that are still at Lane that were there when I was a student. And, it was awkward, but I think, I just went about my business. I worked hard, and I think I earned the respect of the faculty, and now I have 3 members of my staff that played for me, so it kind of comes full circle, and I think that I know I sound probably like a broken record and sound probably kind of cheesy, but I think, like Coach, you can't take special for granted. Lane is a special place, and people do want to be back because of the experience that I think we had there as students, and we have a lot of alum that come back and teach and coach there. So, it's not like I was the only case, but it was definitely awkward. And to be honest, I met my wife at Lane too, and we're married, and we're 8 years married, and we met in the halls at Lane too. So it's kind of surreal, to be honest with you.
It's been the center of your life. Let's put it that way. How about we just summarize it that way?
Yeah. Fair
so when you finally get a chance to take over the program, and obviously, you're coming in, and there's been success there in the past, but you're taking over. What are some of the things that you look to establish in terms of the culture and the kind of program that you wanted to run and that you continue to want to run today? What are some of the pillars of your program and what you're trying to accomplish with your kids day in and day out?
Yeah, if I start rambling, feel free to cut me off, because I can sit up here and
just go, man. Just go.
Yeah.
We're good.
So yeah, one of the first and foremost, we say we are a family. We say every time we break down, we say family, and I believe, in my experience as a player and my whole life, basketball has done so much more for me than I could ever do for it. And I really believe it's a brotherhood. I have some of my dearest friends that I've met through the game, and so many life lessons and takeaways, and shaped me into the father and the husband and the man that I am today. So I really try to get our guys bought into the fact that this game teaches you a lot, and the guys that you're with during our, really our season is obviously November to March, but we're conditioning, and then we're in summer ball, and it's a year-round commitment, and you're going to spend more time with the brothers in our program than sometimes your own family. And I remember being a freshman at Lane, and like our school selective enrollment, so it's not a neighborhood school. So we have kids that can literally come to our school from anywhere in the city as long as they test to get in, the city limit. So it took me 25 minutes, half hour to get to school and back every day. And I remember getting out of practice. We have 2 gyms, and we have 6 teams between the boys and the girls, freshman and sophomore varsity. So my freshman year at Lane, there was a lot of nights I'm practicing, getting out at 8 o'clock. And I'm at school all day, and then I'm getting home at 8:30, and everyone's getting ready to go to bed, and
yeah.
It was really a culture shock for me, because I'm so close to my family, and my parents are my pillars, and my everything, and my sister. We're such a close, tight-knit family, and not getting to see them was really hard for me. But it was playing basketball, so it's what I wanted to do, and I own the choice. And so that's one of the big things that we say to our guys now, that this is a family, it's a brotherhood. And I know it sounds cheesy, and I know a lot of people probably use those terms, and it's almost cliche at times, but my goal and what I wake up every day is my objective is to make sure our guys feel that it's not just lip service, it's a feeling, and our guys, if they do feel that, then the trust can start happening, where they trust me and they believe in what we're doing, and then I can trust them. And Doug Collins, I've seen him speak several times, and he always asks that question, what comes first, trust or truth? And it's such a great question, but I've come to believe that trust comes first for me, and I'm going to trust you until you give me a reason not to. So I really try to make that a big priority with our guys, and the way we go about this family and this idea of building trust is, I'm very active in our school community. I'm in the hallways every day, and I think people observe, I shake my students' hands every day when they walk into my class, but my players will literally kind of leave the friend group they're with, or come up from the stairway on the other side of the hallway to come up and shake my hand, look me in the eye, and just kind of have a quick, like, hey, how's it going? What's going on with your day? It's just kind of the culture that we built, that we're going to treat each other with respect. We're going to look each other in the eye. We're going to have a conversation. And we're gonna hug when it's time to hug. We're gonna hold hands in our communication circle at the end of every day of practice and look each other in the eye and speak truth to each other. So those are some of the big things in terms of just our family and our dynamic. Our 4 core values, the 4 C's of our program. We talk about communication, obviously, and not just the words we say, but our body language, the way that we verbalize what we say, but the way we communicate through our actions, that's huge. And we actually have a few communication activities we do just to show the importance of how we communicate. And I can go off on those if you want to, but just getting back to the other 4 C's. So we have communication, we have commitment, and that's a word that's just thrown around, and again, being an English teacher and being someone who's very big on word choice and vocabulary, that word can't just be lip service either. A commitment means that you're all in. You're not halfway in, you're not in when you feel like it, you're all in, and you're going to represent us with class and with dignity in everything that you do. And so that's something we talk about, obviously, and we have guys, I remember we had a captain of our team who was coming from, the furthest south point of our city. It took him 2 hours to get to Tulane every day, because he was an academic kid and he wanted to get out of his neighborhood school, and he made the decision to come to Tulane. And I think about that now, and I think about what that commitment looked like. Think about getting out of practice at 6 o'clock and taking a 2-hour bus ride home, and having to do that every day. And then think about our games getting out at 8, 9 o'clock. The Chicago Transit, CTA stops running. There were times where this guy had to sleep over at teammates' houses just so he can be on the basketball team. So commitment's a big deal for us. And if I'm asking these guys to be as committed as we need them to be, then I have to own that as the head coach as well. And I think our guys know the commitment level from our coaching staff. So that's the second C. The third C is caring. I actually had that when I first started as a coach, and I removed it for a few years because I was kind of like, I feel like maybe that makes us kind of sound soft, because I really was trying to build our program on this identity of toughness, and but what I've learned is caring isn't a soft word at all. Caring is being there for your brother through everything, and caring is putting your teammates before you, and understanding that this is a brotherhood and it's bigger than basketball, so we talk about those things a lot. My basketball family is a very big part of my family. My daughter, I had to pick her up from school today and bring her back to our school because we were hosting a girls volleyball regional, and every one of my players came up to, my daughter's Francesca, we call her Frankie. Every one of my players came up to her in the hallway and gave her a high five, and asked her how her swimming class was, and that's special to me. Like our guys care about my family and I care about theirs, and our staff is the same way. So there's that. I'm sorry, I digress.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah. That's fantastic. Go on to the fourth one.
Yeah. So we've had a few C's kind of come in and come out over the years. So we've talked about commitment, communication, caring, and then we talk a lot about, obviously, this idea of competition. But our last one is competitiveness. And we've had a lot of them over the years, but competitiveness, I think, is the word that best sums up what we're trying to get out of our fourth C and our pillar. We need guys that want to compete, but compete the right way. That's how every one of our C's, we have a little mantra to define it, and it's hanging in our locker room. But our fourth C, competitiveness, we just define it as competing the right way. I think a lot of guys compete. Competing is the price of admission. Like if you're not competing, why are you here? But we talk about competing the right way. Understanding what our goals are for the game, not taking selfish shots because you feel like you were iced out on a play or two and making this about you. Literally stop. We don't have shot blockers in our program. We have our big kid is 6'6", 6'7", but he's not a shot blocker. He's a big body that needs to get to space and take charges and just be a rim protector and show both hands and not leave his feet and get in foul trouble. Like those are things that I think competing the right way, that's what that means. So we really try to define that for every one of our players. And have conversations with them in our individual meetings about, here's what we need you to do to compete for us, And, I learned a few years ago, too, that not everyone's going to be a role player. And I obviously I knew that my whole life, but it was hard to communicate that as a coach. But then I realized, my whole life as a player, I was a role player, and I was totally fine with that, and I loved being a part of it. So now I'm at a point where I tell our guys, like, you have a role. Every one of you has a role that's important to what we do. And if you're upset with playing time, I don't have sympathy for you. And I have a lot of empathy for you, but I don't have sympathy for you because I was there. And, if you love this game, you're coming to show up for your brother and for this program, and it's bigger than you. So that transparency has really helped our program, I think, take another notch up. I can keep going, but I'm going to stop there.
All right, let's circle back because I'm always interested. One of the things that I really like about the coaching process, and I'm not coaching in high school anymore, but I coach a lot. I spend a lot of time coaching my own kids' teams, and so I'm always looking for, one of the things I love to do is do those communication activities and team building activities, because I just think that, again, those are things that you take away that help to build not only your team, but also helps to build friendships within the players that you're coaching. And so give me one or two of those, little communication activities that you do with your kids to get them going and get them communicating and building those relationships that you need to have a tight-knit team.
Yeah, I'll give you three, and I'll stop. But three of my favorite ones. One is just one I stole right from Coach Showalter, with the communication circle at the end of every practice. And we literally, I was at Marquette the other day and heard a great quote. A great practice is defined by how you end it. And I think there's going to be a lot of emotions in a practice. But I remember early on, practice would end, and it just sometimes we'd end on a bad note, and it would trickle into the next day. So no matter where we're at, we've had a good competitive practice or we've ended on kind of a poor note, we end with a communication circle. And what that means is, basketball is now done. Let's circle up. Let's look each other in the eye, and I'll have a thought for them every day. And sometimes the thought is very intense, like, tell us something we don't know about you, or tell us tell us something about your family, or tell us what you want to do when you get out of college. And then some of them are like, what's your favorite movie, what's your favorite book, what's your and then when there's a great game on, who's winning tonight, Duke, Carolina, and we just kind of do little things like that. So that's one big thing, and we have to look each other in the eye and we have to hold hands while we communicate. So that's every day at the end of practice. Another one we'll do, this has actually started just being at a small Division III school, and you kind of have to make your own fun. So in college, we would be in our dorm rooms, and we'd get the whole floor kind of in our dorm room at nights, watching a basketball game. And one night, one of our buddies just walked in, was just having a really rough day, and he was like, I feel worthless right now. So we all just kind of like sarcastically started giving him a lot of these great compliments, and it kind of became, we called it raise the roof on self-esteem, and it just became just a big joke, that we kind of did from time to time. Everyone would say just one nice thing about you, and it sounds really weird, but it's what you do on a college campus that isn't very active. So we made our own fun, and I took that game with me. And I mean, literally, in the dog days of the season, we'll go into the locker room at the end of a practice, and I'm like, all right, guys, let's raise the roof on self-esteem, and we'll say, okay, hey, Johnny's up. Everyone's got to say one nice thing about Johnny, and you can't repeat it, and it's got to be a sincere compliment. Hey, thought you competed really well today. Hey, that block, in our last game was sick, or whatever it is, and I'm telling you, you leave the room and you just feel good about yourself, and it's just a way, after a tough loss, or maybe, like I said, dog days, January, February, winter months in Chicago are just brutal. We'll just leave kind of feeling good for the day. And then another one we do is this block game I kind of stole from one of my cooperating teachers, and we get 10 or 11, whatever it is, Lego blocks or just wooden blocks, and we set up two guys in desks back to back, and one guy's the communicator and one guy's the listener, and the communicator has a minute to set up the blocks and any kind of formation he wants on the desk, and he's just got to kind of verbalize that to his partner, and the partner's got to listen and set up his blocks the same way. I've been doing this for 14 years. I do it with all of my classes, so we're talking about probably well over 2,000 kids, and then my players every year. And I probably had a handful of groups that have gotten it right, because so often, when we're hearing something, we're hearing it our way, and we're not really, listening to the small, intricate details, or maybe we're not giving those small intricate details. And in our mind, it makes perfect sense, but it's not being communicated that way. And that's a great way at the start of every season to get guys understanding, like, hey, details matter, how we communicate matters, and sometimes what you're thinking you communicated isn't being received, and it's a great way to get to the drawing board and talk about our communication as one of our core values.
Yeah, those three are all fantastic. How do you when kids come into your program and they experience those things for the first time, what is that? How resistant are they at first? And obviously there's you've built a culture where there's upperclassmen and people that have gone through it and done it before. But when a kid comes in and does that communication circle for the first time, I got to believe that they feel kind of awkward and self-conscious when they're holding hands and looking their teammate in the eye and having to talk about things they might not ordinarily talk about. So do you prep them for that process of like, hey, this is going to be uncomfortable, but this is something that's going to make it so, again, do you explain the why behind it to the players?
So when we first did it, obviously we had to explain the why, and I love that I'm actually reading that book right now, Start With Why. I love that. But no, when I first did it, we had to kind of tell the guys, here's why we're doing what we're doing, and here's our goal with this. And obviously, we're talking about, inner city Chicago kids, and no, they didn't like it at all, and they thought it was really uncomfortable and awkward, and they didn't like it, at all. But as the year progressed, that first team that did it, it kind of started becoming a part of who we are and what we did, and by year 2, it was just who we are. It's what we do, and the every level has to do it now. So our freshmen are doing it, our sophomores are doing it, our varsity's doing it, and it's just a part of the culture. And then the freshman coaches do explain a little bit to the freshman team when we start, but no, now it's part of what we do, and it's expected. And to be honest with you, it's kind of taken on a life of its own. I mean, guys are coming up to me before practice like, Coach, I got a great thought for the communication circle today.
That's awesome.
And like, they want to insert themselves in it too. So it's become great. It's an excellent piece for what we're trying to do with communication.
Yeah, that's very cool. I'm sure that, again, that's something that you can't necessarily measure the value of it, but I'm sure the value of it to, again, not just your basketball won-loss record, but also just the, in the development of the young kids that are part of your program. I think that's got to be an invaluable tool to be able to help you on so many different levels.
Yeah, and I'd like to think so, I just think that when we can get comfortable being uncomfortable and we can have those conversations, good things are going to happen. So,
All right, so let's shift gears away from Lane and let's talk a little bit about what you're doing outside of your time at Lane Tech. And first, let's jump into how you got involved with USA Basketball. I'm assuming that your USA Basketball Snow Valley connections sort of are one and the same, but maybe I'm wrong. So start out with how you got involved with USA Basketball, and who knows, maybe you're going to weave Snow Valley in there as well.
Yeah, so it's funny. I think a lot of these stories have kind of some common threads. I listened to your podcast with Coach King, and he reiterated some of the things that I'm probably going to say now, but I was a young coach. I was 25 when I became a head coach, and I remember that year feeling like I have to learn as much as I can in as small amount of time as possible. So
right.
I was every clinic and camp and thing that I can do imaginable. And I remember I drove out to Wisconsin Dells with one of my assistants to one of those Nike clinics, and I think it was in maybe 07. 08, no, maybe it was even a little later, maybe 09 or 2010. But I remember getting out there to that clinic, and Coach Showalter was just getting on that circuit. He just really started working with the USA team, and I think brought home his first or second gold medal. And Nike had him on the circuit, and I remember, and you asked this earlier about what your kind of takeaways are when you go into a practice or a clinic, and like we said, I think a lot of times we attract what we are. And like I said, I'm not trying to whatever. I think there's a lot of common threads between good people, and Coach Showalter is as good of a man as I've ever met in my whole entire life. I mean, he is a true mentor. He's a friend, and he's someone I truly look up to. Not just it really has not that much to do with basketball. I mean, he's a family man. He does things the right way. He's at the highest character. And I remember before he even spoke, he made a little joke. The first thing he said was like, "How many of you guys coach McDonald's all Americans?" And of course, there's one or two coaches in the crowd that want raise their hand, and they're all proud. And
right,
and, all the guys who preceded Coach Show at that clinic were all Division I college coaches, so they all coached McDonald's All Americans. So Showalter, looks around and he's like, "Yeah, me neither," and I got a chuckle out of that. And then he made a joke. His wife Vicky was in the front row, and he's like, "Yeah, my wife's here, and my grandkids we're up here at the Dells, and we're making a little vacation out of it." And I just remember like it was yesterday. I was just about to get married myself, or I had just gotten married, and I had a really weird vibe when I first started coaching. And a lot of my predecessors and people I spoke to told me I would have a hard time being this father and husband, and because we're married to the game, and that's such a, just, I don't want to curse on your podcast, but a lot of people were just saying that those things don't go together, and I just had a hard time believing that. And I just really tried to make it my mission to find coaches who I thought were doing it the right way, and were balancing, had that work-life balance, where they had a family that they were very proud of and loved, and were coaching the game the right way. And when I saw Show, I was like, this is a guy that I really need to just be around as much as I can. And all he mentioned was, we do this camp called Snow Valley. If they're ever interested in coming out and checking it out, let me know. And it really had nothing to do with USAB. I mean, I was obviously just like everybody else in our country. USAB is the standard, is the gold standard. And I mean, obviously, hey, if there's anything I could learn about USAB, great. But I want to work this camp, and I want to see what Show's really about and learn from him as much as I could. So I remember just, I never really do this. A lot of the coaches go up to the coaches afterwards and get a photo and do all that. But I literally darted out of the crowd and was the first guy up. I kind of ran up to him. I was like, "Coach, I really would love to be involved with your camp. I'm from Chicago. I'm a young coach. Like, how can I get involved?" And he gave me his card. He gave me his email. I emailed him. And that next summer I was down there with 5 of my Lane Tech guys. And it was one of the best experiences. It was a cleansing experience, to be honest with you, that I've ever had. And just being around so many great basketball minds who love the game and want to give back. It's just become a part of my routine now. I mean, I've been back there every year since. There was one summer I had 25 Lane Tech players come down with me, just to be a part of, to see what it was like. And I think that's why Show likes me so much, because he's making a
lot of business, right? Man, you just start generating business for him. Of course, you're working there every summer. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. He's not a dumb man. He knows what he's doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but no, I mean, it's really special. And I'll tell you what, if you guys get a chance to come down and see what it's about, I mean, it really is. It's a cleansing experience. If you're a basketball enthusiast and you're someone who believes in the game and the things that the game can do for the youth of America, this is the place for you. And so I was just down there and got to know a lot of the people down there. And really, it was my communication. Matt King had become a really good friend of mine down there, and we roomed together for a few years. And actually, I know Alan Stein was on here. I roomed with Alan Stein one year down there, and he and I had become buddies, and just met so many great people. But I told Matt King one year, kind of on a side note, not to get into a morbid discussion, but I had a pretty traumatic experience happen in 2014 when one of my cousin was shot, and we can get into that at a different point, or we can talk about it, whatever. But I started trying to do some work in the city to help promote the end of gun violence in our cities. And one of the ideas I had was putting on like a 3-on-3 tournament / youth clinic with our park district. So I got to talk kind of mad about that. I'm like, I kind of want to do this. I like to do some youth clinics. He's like, man, you should really talk to USAB and their 3-on-3 division, because they're looking for people to put on some tournaments, and he kind of got me in touch with some of those people, and that kind of turned into a discussion about they were doing an academy in Chicago, and they needed someone to kind of do the youth clinic, and I happened to fly out to Vegas for their first ever academy, and I got to help out at their youth clinic there. So since then, Coach always says, if you do a good job, you work hard, good things happen. So I've been very blessed to be kind of a lead clinician for them with the youth clinics. I've worked 2 or 3 of their regional camps now. I've spoken at 2 of their academies, and actually when they came to Chicago this past spring, we actually hosted it at Lane Tech and had guys like Chris Collins in our gym speaking, which was obviously super special. So that's kind of like the story there, and it's been going for about 4 or 5 years now, just with volunteering and being involved in any way that they need me to serve.
Talk a little bit about the 3-on-3
Yep.
and exactly what you do with that, because that's something I think that more people are starting to slowly become aware of the fact that it's going to be an Olympic sport, and they know that people are starting to see that it's on the horizon. I'm a huge proponent of 3-on-3. I really think that if we could get young kids playing more 3-on-3 and less 5-on-5, I think the development in our game would probably be much better. So talk a little bit about what you're doing and what USA Basketball's vision is for 3-on-3.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, and I think you're right. I think people are really starting to see the merit behind 3-on-3, and they're starting to see that now. Hey, it's an Olympic sport. Like, hey, we got to start playing this thing again. And, growing up in inner city Chicago, every year the Bulls won a championship. They did this big 3-on-3 tournament called Shoot the Bull. So it was kind of a thing in Chicago for a long time and kind of fizzled. So when I talked to them a little bit, I was like, hey guys, I do at our lane practices, we do short-sided games all the time. We play 3-on-3, we do breakdown, we do 3-on-3 on one side of the floor to work on post coverages. I mean, I'm just a huge believer in it. So I was like, if you guys want us to put on some tournaments in the city, I'm looking, like I told you, I wanted to do a youth clinic and a 3-on-3 at an outdoor park and just get people there and raise awareness about ending gun violence. And they're like, well, hey, we do need some tournaments to pop up, and it kind of became a kind of a formalized thing where myself and a couple other guys were kind of plucked, and we're in different parts of the country, and we've been helping USAB put on qualifiers to earn FIBA points, because the whole deal is there's obviously FIBA, and you have to have a player profile, and pretty much every country accrues points based on the individuals within your country accruing FIBA points by playing in tournaments. And there's a color coding system. I was actually on a call with the head of FIBA on a Skype call a couple of years ago, learning about all these details of how you accrue points. And so we've been slowly doing qualifiers in Chicago for U18 men and U18 women, and then open men and open women over the past few years. It was really cool. A couple of years ago, we did a qualifier at a Southside YMCA. We did a huge youth clinic a couple days. We actually had 5 sessions. We had about 200 kids, inner city Chicago kids, come. We did a youth clinic, and then we ran a qualifier. And the team that won our qualifier were all former Chicago Public League guys, and guys that are now playing in the league. Alfonso McKinney, Stefan Hanna played with the G League for D League at the time for a while. DeAndre Liggins, who was with the Cavs for a stint there. And Mike Henry, who's been in the G League and had some stints with the Grizzlies. And that was a squad that came out and played in this 3-on-3 qualifier, and they won the Chicago tournament, and then they won the USA Open Championship, the qualifier at the Colorado Springs Training Center, and they went on and finished second in the world that year. So it was pretty cool, and in a small way, just putting on this little tournament, we got that team out there, and so it's been pretty cool, and that's what we're doing now. We're slowly rolling out qualifiers here and there, and trying to get more people playing the game and getting excited about the game. But like you said, to be honest, man, there's a lot of high school coaches still don't understand the merit behind it, and have been kind of reluctant to get their teams in these tournaments. So that's kind of the mission now, is getting more high schools to get their teams involved.
And so when you go out, like, how many tournaments are you running? When you're talking about you're running a qualifier here, a qualifier there, over the course of a year or summer, what's the time frame for when you run them, and then how many do you run, in a given year?
So when we first started, I'm not exactly sure of why this happened or how this happened, but FIBA kind of changed the timing of when the championships would be. And the first summer that I was really involved, it was kind of a quick turnaround, and we did a couple qualifiers, I think early June or mid-June, early July. And the championships, the national tournament, was that August. So it was a very quick turnaround, but that's really when we first kind of got started. But now the championships for the Olympic Training Center are in April. So we're really in a tough bind here, especially with the U18 men, because there's just so many other things for them to be doing with basketball. When our season's from November to March, and then you turn around right away and you're in AAU in the spring, March and April. And then May and June is May is down a little bit, but then June and July, or June, you're playing with your high school teams in most parts of the country, and then July is a live period with AAU. So that really leaves just a very small window of time for us to really try to recruit and get guys playing. So really, we in Chicago, at least in my network, I try to run a qualifier in August and try to run a qualifier in either September or October, right before the season kind of gets rolling. And we try to get at least 2 teams to win qualifiers from the Chicagoland area, Midwest area, that will get to represent, to play at the national tournament at Colorado Springs.
So how many teams do you typically have then in a qualifier?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be completely honest. Like I said, high school coaches still aren't completely in, and I email a lot of my buddies that are high school coaches. I've sent out blast emails to the whole state and federation, and or not federation, the whole state association. And there's been some coaches that are starting, hey, this sounds like a good idea, hey, we might want to get involved. But it's obviously about finding a sweet spot with time too, because in August, at least in Illinois, is a non-contact period. We can't work with our guys when June and July we only get 25 contact days. So once August hits, for a lot of high school coaches, that's like the 1 month where they're really completely off, and they don't really have a lot of contact with their guys. And that's when we're trying to run one of these qualifiers. So I've actually kind of really been lucky to get a partnership going with the Chicago Park Districts, and they've really had a lot of their parks getting teams in, and a lot of these parks have guys who play high school ball, but in those months in August, they're kind of playing at their park a lot and just doing things like that. So we typically try to get 12 to 16 team qualifiers, in August and then in October. But I'm going to be honest with you, there's been times where we've met that mark, and there's been times where we've been short on that mark. But we're slowly getting that culture around what 3-on-3 is growing, I think, and it's becoming a pretty exciting, a pretty exciting game. It's comparable, I think, when you look at the Olympics. You have volleyball indoors, but then you have that beach volleyball game where it's just so fast paced, and it's quick hitting, and it's kind of exciting. And that's kind of how the 3-on-3 game is. With the FIBA rules, you actually play outside. There's a DJ. You're playing 3-on-3. There's no checking the ball. The ball goes through the hoop. It's under the basket. You've got to clear it, and it's live right away. You don't get a break. So it's a lot of fun. But then the other side of the coin, the U18 have been kind of a struggle, but our U18 women just won the gold medal. I think it was last week. And they're actually all 4 players on the team are major Division I players. Our women's team has been very successful, and our men's team has been successful. They didn't win the gold last time around, but like I said, the one team we had finished second in the world, and the last team we had was very competitive and did well. So it's growing. It's getting I think where we'd like it to be, but it takes time, just like anything.
Yeah, I think it's awesome that it's going to be an Olympic sport. I think that's going to bring so much more visibility to it. And like I said, I just think from a standpoint of if you could get younger kids playing 3-on-3 instead of playing 5-on-5 when they're in second or third grade, and they just spend so much time running up and down the floor and not actually playing when they're, when you're playing in a half-court, short-sided game like that, and you're just getting so many more touches and opportunities, and the floor is more open, and again, it's just a much better way to develop skills. So I'm hoping that by bringing it into the Olympics, that it's really going to get the exposure that it needs, so that people start to see the value. Because I know one of the things that we're trying to do around here is run some more 3-on-3 leagues, run some more 3-on-3 tournaments. And it's, you run into the challenge where people just still, from a parent standpoint, still just see 5-on-5 as, that's the way we have to be doing it. And I've been running camp now this will be my 26th summer, and I have one camp that I run for older kids, which for me, older kids is like middle school. But most of the camps that I run, we don't play any full court games. When we do play games, we play only half court. Again, just for that very reason, because I just think from a development standpoint, it's so much better for kids.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, actually, I've made the same adjustment with our high school youth camps. We don't play any 5-on-5 with the middle school, even the incoming 9th graders. We haven't played 3-on-3. You're working on your skill development. You're working on the skills that we're teaching you at our camp, And defensively, you can't hide. You've got to be in help. You've got to make your rotations. You see who your competitors are, and that's what USA is doing too. They're rolling out their whole handbook and their guidebook is about guys, younger kids. What's the purpose of playing 5-on-5 and just running down the floor, aimlessly? Playing 3-on-3 is where you're developing, honing your skills, and it's obviously about building. There's platforms to reach, and there's got to be growth. Just rolling the ball and running up and down, it's great exercise, but if you want to get better as a basketball player, skill development has to be paramount, especially at that age. So I couldn't agree more with what you're doing. It sounds awesome.
Yeah, that's exactly. I agree completely with what you just said there about, you could just kind of be out jogging, getting great exercise, but if you really want to develop your skills, you got to have the ball in your hands. Let's wrap up, Nick, with one last thing and talk a little bit. We've kind of touched on it, kind of throughout the podcast tonight, but talk a little bit about your work, trying to combat gun violence in the city of Chicago. I know you mentioned that it probably stemmed from the unfortunate death of your cousin, and talk a little bit about what you're trying to do and what you have going there to try to help the situation.
Yeah, so actually, good news. My cousin actually surprised. I mean, it's a miracle, but he survived a gunshot wound through the brain and through his spine.
Wow.
So it's been a very rough go for our family over the past 4 years, and but he's my cousin's name's Darren. We had a little hashtag Darren Strong, and he's a fighter, man. And I'll never forget, not to get too morbid, but the night my cousin was shot. I was actually leaving Lane Tech. I announced the football game that night, and I got home and I got a call from my other cousin, and we're all very close. And he's like, Nick, Darren's been shot. And I was like, all right, I'll be right there, and I didn't think that. I mean, unfortunately in Chicago, man, even no matter where you live in the city, it's an epidemic. And I was like, I kind of just thought he was kind of shot in the arm or whatever. I didn't think too much of it. And not that it happens that frequently, but my cousin didn't make it sound like it was that bad, So I got down there, and everyone was just in tears, and just, my cousin who was shot is actually my second cousin. His father is my first cousin, and he's a bigger guy, and he was one of those guys that kind of beat me up playing basketball when I was a kid. And I remember like hugging him and him literally kind of collapsing in my arms, and that was one of those moments that I'll never forget. It was very traumatic, and they kind of came to us that morning and said, if we don't do surgery, he's probably going to pass. The hemorrhaging in his brain is so bad, and we need to get in and try to remove the bullet from his brain. Even if we do that, there's a chance that he might not have a high quality of life. Is that something that you guys want to do? And we as a family obviously said yes. And not to get into that whole story, but he survived. The family's now, my cousin since moved to Florida because they can't handle the Chicago winters and getting him to rehab and everything. But I remember being in the hospital that I took the 2-3 weeks off of work, and I was there every day. And I remember sitting in the hospital in like the little cathedral at the bottom of the basement of the hospital, and just thinking, like, my whole life, I've been trying to think about how to impact and turn negatives into positives. And this is the ultimate negative, and like, what can we do? And I remember that summer, Joakim Noah played for the Bulls, and they did this big public service announcement. It was all over the city, and it was like, Chicago, stand up, stand up for your city, stand up for what's right, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, like, I'm a basketball coach. Like, I'm just going to reach out. Like, I want to do something. I'd like to do a rally. So I reached out to his organization. I told him I was going to host a rally at Lane Tech. And that got some news, and we got all the local news outlets here. And Joakim Noah's mother, Cecilia Rhodey, spoke, and we had some people on handgun violence and policy in Chicago speak. And that kind of stemmed then, unfortunately, we've had quite a few deaths of Chicago public league athletes over the past few years. And a few coaches got together, and they started, we kind of got together and formed Coaches United Against Violence. And we did a program that year, and we got about 300 high school kids from the city to come out, and I actually got Coach K to do a video to speak to the kids. It was kind of like a pre-recorded video about leadership and being active in their community and being leaders in their schools, and that stemmed into a couple other things that we did. And we've been doing the rally now for 4 years, and we've had like Howard Moore from the University of Wisconsin, an inner city Chicago kid. He's spoken at our event. Arnie Duncan, who's the former Secretary of Education for President Obama, spoke 2 years ago. And the goal behind the rally is just trying to get people, all who have a story that are trying to do something in our city to make it better through their own platforms. We've had musicians, we've had people on policy, we've had people making documentaries, and we've had coaches. I mean, just anyone, police officers. This year I'm trying to get some women working in hospitals who have dealt with trauma. I actually, unfortunately, since then, I've had a former player who we've lost, who was shot and killed, and I actually had another former player who was shot last year, and I'm hopeful that he's going to be out to speak this year at our rally about his experience and about just being mindful of where you are and what's around you. So it's an epidemic, man, and it's not just on one side of the city. You know, it's all over the place, and our city's beautiful. Our city is the best place in the world as far as I'm concerned. I know you guys are very proud Cleveland Knights, I believe you say Knights, but I mean, I love Chicago, and I just feel compelled to try to do something with the small platform that I have as a basketball coach. So that's kind of what it's about, you know.
Yeah, it's great that you're using the platform of basketball to be able to have an impact on something beyond just the game. And I think that it's one of the things that, as I've gotten older, that has become much more important to me than it was when I was a kid or when I was a young coach. You kind of get so wrapped up in the game that you love that you forget that there's a larger picture out there. And it's refreshing and fantastic to hear when somebody that's doing something that, obviously you've had some events that have happened to you and your family and your life that, impacted you, and now you're able to go out and use those for positive. And I'm sure, whether your players articulate it to you or not, they see some of the things that you're doing, and hopefully they're going to go out and pay that same thing forward as they get out into the world. And again, that's the kind of impact that I think we all want to have as basketball coaches.
Yeah, amen to that. I really appreciate that sentiment, and I think that's why we all do what we do, right? It's not about a paycheck as a high school or middle school coach, right? It's about impacting lives and trying to do something with the game that what it did for us. We're just trying to return the favor and, like you said, pay it forward. So I appreciate that, and it's what it's all about.
Nick, this has been fantastic. Before we get out of here, is there anything that we didn't hit on tonight that you'd like to share with the audience? And if so, you can go ahead and share it. If not, if you wouldn't mind just sharing with our audience your contact information if anybody wants to reach out to you, ask you a question, or just say hello after they listen to the podcast.
Yeah, I feel like I've rambled. I'm a talker, so I apologize. But just one thing, stay true to you. If you're getting into this thing as a coach, or even if you're a player listening, it's the best piece of advice I've gotten. There's only one you that's truer than true, right? That's Dr. Seuss, and we've all got to be the best version of ourselves every day, and we all have our own gifts to provide the world, and we're all coaches in different ways. So I think it's important just to stay true to who we are and not be so worried about what other people are doing. I think I've gotten caught up in that, and just be you, do your best, work hard every day, and good things will happen. So that's kind of the last thing I'll leave you guys with. But contact information, I'll be happy to give you guys my personal email, and just my name, Nick LoGalbo, LoGalbo @gmail.com. My Twitter handle is @Coach LoGalbo, LoGalbo. I'm on private because of our school social policy issues, and I can't have students following me on social media. So, I have to accept followership, but any coach or any adult that's not a student at our high school, I'll be happy to, accept that. And my Instagram is just LoGalbo11. Happy to connect with any coaches or anyone that wants to talk hoops or whatever. Happy to do that.
Nick, this has been tremendous. We appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to jump on the podcast with us. I know that you've given a lot of tremendous value out there to coaches, parents, players, whoever may be listening. We just can't say thank you enough. And to everyone out there, we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
If you're looking for a great way to spend the holidays playing some basketball, please join us at one of our Head Start basketball holiday camps on December 27th and 28th, 2018. We'll have a camp at Hoop Guru Courthouse in Hinckley and also at St. Paschal Baylon School in Highland Heights. The Head Start basketball holiday camps will emphasize the fundamentals of basketball with individual attention given to each camper. You'll improve your basketball skills and have a ton of fun at the Head Start basketball holiday camp. To register or get more information, please visit our website, www.headstartbasketball.com. Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, brought to you by Head Start Basketball.